Welcome to Midweek Coffee Club number 2. We have Eric, myself, and Rebecca again, the stalwarts. We've finished our kind of warm-up conversation, sharing notes on how to torture yourself in the morning, as I'm trying a new system that involves a 5-minute cold shower and a lot of screaming and yelling. Moving away from torture, highlights of your week. Who's got something?
I'm trying now to connect my week back to torture because that just seems really like the right thing to do. But no, I had a very good week. So I've spent a lot of time crafting some new thoughts for a future article and for Summit. And that's been really fun, connected also to some like intentional mindfulness exercises, and which connects also to crafting a icebreaker for Summit for Women in Agile. So just everything seems really flowy and connected right now, which has been really great. And then watching, a lot of our friends are all at the RTE Summit today, and it's just really exciting to be able to cheerlead everyone there and seeing them do talks that look like they're really meaningful and see them in person together. So just feels really great.
Yeah, I was chatting to someone about the RTE Summit yesterday and going, I wish I could justify a trip to overseas just for it because it's such a cool concept. And apparently it's grown a lot bigger than they anticipated when they kicked it off.
Been on my wish list since it came out, because when it first came out, I was an RTE and I was like, oh, I really want to do that. Well, maybe I had just finished being an RTE. I don't know. But it's definitely been on my list of something I want to do in my life at some point. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I'll pick up on that from the first. Thank you for sharing the pictures of Cheryl speaking and some of those. It's like just same thing. Lights me up to watch people I love doing cool things. And also, it's been a really connective week for me in a remarkably positive way. I had the Future of Agility panel with Princeton Agility last week, and that was fun. A bunch of old ralliers showed up randomly in the audience and were cheering us on and asking really annoying hard questions that I loved. A couple current and future customers came and asked some good questions, and then it was just really interesting having a conversation with Bob Galen and Ronica and Shannon and Mel, and just like all these different perspectives. It wasn't a think tank. We weren't coming from the same place, other than all of us have done something with Agile for quite a long time, and yet our places in life and where we're at, just we're all very forward focused on the impact and the positivity and the like good things that it does for people, and that was just a lot of fun to be a part of. And off of that, I had a couple lovely follow-on conversations with new people I met in the session, and connected with a customer that I last worked with like 8 years ago, who's let's see, how can I say, heading up the PMO for a very well-known large company, and like catching up with his challenges and what he's up to is a lot of fun. It's just been a great week of connection for me. And then there was dancing and time in the sunshine and all kinds of good stuff there.
Sounds awful.
It was horrible. Like sunshine there. You know how much I was completely surrounded by not 8 inches of snow here?
Yeah.
It's funny.
Oh,
I was thinking about it while I was having my cold shower this morning, actually. What was my highlight? And I was caught between two, and actually the first one I was caught between was connection. This is a week where I've deliberately reached out and gone, hey, 2024 is a month old now. Who are some of the people I haven't chatted to since the year started or for too long? And I've just been reaching out and reconnecting with a bunch of people, checking in on some people that I used to coach to see how they're going, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great chats. But I actually opted for a different highlight of the week, which has been the joy of iteration. Thanks to various things, not least Rebecca pointing me towards slidology. I think I mentioned last week I've been doing iteration 2 of my product owner course from last year. And I'm teaching it using a cohort system. So it's like a 2-hour session every week. We teach a module, they have homework, they experiment on new techniques during the week, and then we open the next week with a debrief. And I'm actually now treating every week as an iteration. What happens when you shift it into that format? Based on what I've learned the last few weeks, what's going to change about the way I approach the next week? But at the same time, the slidology thinking is going crazy for me. And so I'm looking at all these slides that I created last year that I was very proud of, going, I hate them now, but so how do I reframe them using new ideas? And then that process of reframing, when you start to really, really think deliberately about every slide as a creation, you have much deeper thinking about the actual concepts. It's really wiring into what's most important to get across and looking critically back at what came across or didn't come across and how do I shift in that mode. So I guess it's the old eating your dog food, right? That notion of every week deliver a module, take the learnings, tweak the module for the next week, and then lose yourself for hours in revisualizing.
Nice. I was actually curious about a lot of stuff when you just said that, but is there like an Australian version of eat your own dog food? Something about a dingo or something?
The dog food eats back in Australia? I don't know.
Koalas.
So I actually had 2 dingo crosses for quite a few years.
Nice.
They were amazing, amazing dogs. In some ways, a little bit more like cats and dogs, stupidly intelligent. But
Poor dog.
I love that you framed it that way. I agree.
There was a lot in that one little short sentence.
I always have vivid memories of, so the female, basically it was mother and son, and the female, when she was pregnant, loved her calcium supplement. And we used to keep it in a cupboard under the stove, and it had a child-proof cap on it. And we come home one day and she has opened the cupboard under the stove, pulled out her calcium supplement, removed the child-proof cap, and is sitting there with it held between her paws, licking out the calcium
Looking
supplement.
happy.
But she's removed it dexterously enough that we can just screw it back on.
Oh, wow.
That is
That's impressive.
They're just crazy. But back to your question. No, we don't have an Australian equivalent of eat your own dog food that I can bring to mind suddenly.
Apparently it's like open your own dog food as a dingo down there. Anyway, sorry, I diverge.
I don't know. I'm just thinking, I keep thinking the Americanized version of Australians' version of that, kind of like the Australian Shepherd that Australians have never heard of. But the American perspective on that be like, in Australia, the dog food eats you, or something like that. But I think that's true of some companies here.
Fair.
I've always preferred it to drink your own champagne. I will tell you that.
Really?
Perhaps it just tells you that I'm not a champagne guy, but
I like that. Yeah, I like. I think it's good to recognize that everything we build was good at the moment. There's always something you can do better.
I was just having a conversation around the Prime Directive with somebody. Norm's quote for retrospectives. Everybody was doing the best they could with the information they had at the time. Like, we built it. We did great. Now let's recognize where it is today and how applicable it is and build it again.
Nice.
The hunt for relentless improvement. It's funny.
Yep.
It's a very big thing in my head right now, and we've shifted the format for SPCs Unleashed a lot this year based on a retro we did at the end of last year, and did the first episode. It was a lot of fun. Really liked the changes we've made in terms of energy. But one of the shifts has been, like, we've always been rotating facilitators, but we decided to be very deliberate about the facilitator sitting more strongly in a facilitation stance than a storytelling stance in the way it's going to run. So now when we're kind of looking at the backlog going, who's going to facilitate what? There's a piece of the puzzle that is, if you really feel passionate about a topic, make sure you're not the facilitator so you get to talk and tell stories. And I think I was originally on deck to facilitate built-in quality, and everybody knows how obsessive I get about it. And they're like, Mark, maybe skip that one. So now I'm facilitating relentless improvement next. And it's like, but I feel passionate about that too.
It's hard when you care about everything.
Yeah, I must say, is there anything on the list you don't care about?
Live solution.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's pretty cool. I do think that the iterations that you're doing there are paying off. I really enjoyed the last one I saw. The built-in quality one. It just was, I liked the stories. I liked how warm it was. I liked that you guys were being really helpful and open with each other, and then giving nice little gifts to the audience. So well done on the changes that you guys did.
The power of a 2-hour retrospective.
Yeah. It's like they work or something. Someone
Well,
should guide people to.
it was funny because we streamed the retro and my time box management was horrendously off. We planned 2 hours, and I had a structure for 2 hours. And, what's the first thing you teach about retrospective time boxing is make sure that you're devoting a good slab of your retrospective to actually deciding what you're going to do next. Because so many people run a retro and they have a big talk and they got 3 minutes at the end to go, what are we going to do with this? As opposed to being quite deliberate about it. So I'd prepared the very deliberate, what are we going to do with it? And then we ran out of time. And I sat there going, I just hope the people I coached haven't watched my time boxing on this. But then what happened was we all cooked on it over the break. And we had a part 2 of the retro to go, okay, now we've cooked on it. What are we going to do? And it was good fun.
Yeah, wonderful planning. You nailed it. You did exactly as you intended to. And revisionist history is often beneficial.
Yes, I'm just painfully truthful at times. I should be more revisionist. I think it's more fun if you get to be revisionist.
So you said that you've been thinking a lot about iteration in general. Is it just for that or other pieces too?
Look, I think the interesting aspect of iteration in general and what really brings it to mind when you're playing with the product owner course is because I think it's just a huge struggle I see so many agile teams and product owners go through of actually iterating. Okay? Doesn't matter how often we say the word iteration. I always go back to the Jeff Patton Mona Lisa drawing. Right? Are you building the Mona Lisa painting as 10 perfectly shaped puzzle pieces that eventually will fit together? Or are you sketching it, getting feedback on the sketch, enhancing the sketch, getting feedback on the enhancement, and actually learning your way towards the outcome through iterations and getting that baked into team psyches in their interpretation of agility is really, it's such a challenge for so many teams. And
why do you think that is?
look, I think every time I've looked at a specific team, it's felt like it's an expectation question. There are perceived constraints, and whether the perceived constraint is show progress or predictability or I definitely know there's a wiring of people that don't like to show unfinished stuff.
Mhm.
You know, if you think about the classic example of that, it's the PowerPoint deck that, you know I work with so many executives who go, I keep telling my people, don't waste your time creating a huge polished presentation before you come to me with it. Get your core thoughts down so we can talk about your core thoughts, and I can save you a lot of time polishing the wrong thing. And people just keep coming back with polished things and a lot of waste.
Out of curiosity, how does that individual respond when they are given something unpolished or not fully formed?
Generally, really proactively.
Okay.
The ones I've known who have been most obsessive about it go on campaigns to teach their people to reinforce the behaviours. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Why is it that people struggle so much with actually iterating rather than producing a series of polished pieces?
I've got a few thoughts on this one. One, of course, is fear or variations on that theme. Like, what happens if I deliver something that's not polished? Well, the last 20 times I did that, I got smacked, screamed at, hurt in some way emotionally. Like the feedback was about the presentation and how I did it rather than the content. So I'm going to spend all my time making it beautiful. And I've watched executives that I've coached that say they want the unpolished, or worse, they complain about how long it takes for people to share anything with them. But then when there's any minor error, even just like a line out of place, they point it out, and usually not in a very polite way. So everything takes longer. Everything has to be perfectly formed. There's 5 meetings to review the decks before it goes in front of him. Like, so there's that whole fear and like what happens if it isn't perfect response at any level. And then the other one is just the I think of it as the hangover from the project management mindset, but the pre-optimization of the time box. We've already cut the time box down to optimize it that we don't have iterations available. So whatever we get out the door the first time, we might get one round of revs or defect correction, but we don't get a chance to reimagine or truly reconsider it. And you can go in circles of where the blame is and whether it's because MVP wasn't identified or whatever, but that building iteration time out makes it so you don't get to iterate. Then I think there's just an inherent sense of pride and desire to create something that's good at any time. People have that. It's harder to share stuff that doesn't feel like it meets that bar until you've been rewarded for it enough time.
I guess I take it like 2 different routes, and I do think a lot about this a lot after joining the team that I'm on, because there's so much, like, the point of our team is to really thresh things, right? But to Eric, your point, it's you just reminded me a lot of Creative Confidence is a book I just love by Kelly and Kelly. And there are just examples, and I think it's prevalent, going forward into life too. But as a child, like that first moment where you bring your piece of artwork to your parents and you say, look at this, and you're super proud, and you drew the best kitty cat in space ever. And they look at it and say, that is an awesome apartment building. Good job, honey. And you're just killed, and you know that you didn't do that well, and you're not going to try to be creative in the future. And I think we do that to each other as adults too. So, somebody has something that they have a concept in their head of what it is that they just produced. And without trying to figure out, like, what is it that you've produced right now, or asking some leading questions, we immediately go, like, this is what I see, and this is what is wrong with what I see. And I think that kind of connects to what I've learned on the team that I'm on right now, is there's just a level of like gaining the confidence again to build something as a we instead of as an I. Also means being really eager to ask questions. of each other about like, what are you bringing me at this moment or us at this moment? And the thing that we're bringing, like just being really authentic about, hey, like right now I've got this concept. It's really just a concept. I have done research, but I'm totally open to feedback about this, that, or that. And I really desire that feedback and I want to craft versus sometimes we have what I think is less healthy conversations because somebody's brought to the table, like, I'm ready for feedback, but they didn't say what type. And so we end up like giving feedback they didn't really need. That person gets frustrated because we're like 4 rounds into feedback giving and it's getting too deep in a particular area that person already feels like they've done everything around. So being authentic with each other about what you're really looking for as a team, and then also just continuing to gain trust and comfort with each other that we're in pursuit of the best outcome together, not in pursuit of the best, most proud thing Rebecca could create. And I've seen that as really hard for teams too, of like, I want to be amazing at what I do, which is true and fine, but we're better amazing together. So how do we really lean into that?
That disconnect on type of feedback, environment of feedback, direction of feedback, whatever, is one that I've felt a lot of frustration about over the years too. Like I caused some rifts over it when I disregard feedback because it wasn't the type I was looking for. And I'm not
Yeah.
even like critical versus not critical or positive versus negative, more like, I don't know, take something that I'm iterating on and had the courage to share with somebody that would be a potential user for the first time. Like, I know this is too dense. How dense is it? And if somebody started coming in and like wordsmithing and picking on the sentence structure, when I'm looking for, should this be a little less dense or a lot less dense, I tend to ignore that. And it's valuable feedback, but it's not what I'm hearing. And
Right.
also, this
Well,
has to be a lot less dense.
I think there is a moment in any sort of thing that you create where you do have, hopefully, like you spend enough time and brain power and passion against it that you do have some pride in it. And I think the mix of like, I have pride in what I've built and I have pride in like the people around me and that they can help me be better is different than like, I have pride in the thing I built and therefore if you touch it, I'm going to be offended or I'm going to have feelings or I'm going to have to sleep on it before I can actually have a healthy response. And I'm very much admitting I tend to really have to pull myself out of, I've gotten this far down a road. I'm really proud of all the work I did. And I'm not forcing myself in the brain space of like, yes, you did all this hard work, but we need each other and it's each other that's going to make it better. And I think any team and any individual on a team should and can spend time really thinking about that.
I think there's an interesting thread in there around developing protocols around setting specific expectations about the type of feedback you're looking for. And I think for some of us that comes quite naturally. Like, when I stood up and taught the first version of the course last year, I went, this is the MVP. You are my guinea pigs. And likewise every week at the moment I turn up and go, hey, I learned some stuff last week. And by the way, throw away these handouts because now they've iterated. But I don't mind being upfront and really setting the expectations around where we are and what I'm hoping to give and get in the moment. But that's a habit I've built over the years. And I wonder whether, it was interesting to listen to you talk about protocols because, having sat through a couple of feedback sessions with your team, Rebecca, they're interesting. There was one of them that I was very glad I was watching a recording rather than sitting there in person. But it was actually really helpful feedback.
I haven't had the privilege yet of doing the recorded feedback. I've done the live team, and that's a lot of fun. And even as I'm in the middle of those, I'm truly having a lot of fun because I trust everybody on the team, and there's a really good back and forth, and I know I can say what I believe, and then be willing Yet, even as I'm doing that, I'm like thinking like, oh, I can imagine person X would just be crushed in this. Like they would never want to come back again. And you have to have a certain degree of confidence going in to one of
Yeah.
those sessions to be able to survive it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from a couple different points because I really, this team and being on other teams have really made me just think about team a lot. And I think part of when we talk about like, there's nothing better than being on a team than being on a team of teams, I think being on a team that is teaming is such a gift because you're gifting each other every moment, which I think is slightly different than being like somebody like your use case, Mark, of like creating a presentation and you're like letting the people that you're presenting to know what gift you're giving them and like what gift you want to get back, and where you're at in your cycle. I just have feelings about like the purpose of a true team is really to be that gift for each other all the time, which means, yeah, you do need some protocols and some intentionality about this is what I'm looking for from you, the rest of the team right now. Asking questions if you're not sure. And then I think some of it is about, we've had discussions and thought about that too. Like we can't be this open and honest around X, Y, or Z person, but that's also something to help that X, Y, or Z person with, because no matter what type of team you're on, if you are on a team, giving and receiving feedback is one of the biggest gifts that you can have. And that's how you start to build that real, feedback cycles and trust to innovate and trust to iterate. And I see so often teams that are instead focusing on like, this is my piece and this is my part. And I do think that comes with like not actually either understanding or living the gift of being on a team.
Everything you just said also applies at the team of teams. Individual teams get that identity versus shared network, countering that day frame. A couple different.
So, as I was listening to you, Becca, I had flashbacks to a great book.
Ooh.
Surprise, surprise. It's a Jerry Weinberg book, The Art of Giving and Receiving Feedback.
Yeah.
And obviously, we chatted about Virginia Satir last week, the temperature check, and her whole family therapy stuff was very focused on enabling the exchange of feedback. And this is kind of Weinberg's take on it. It's a worthwhile read. I found it really useful for helping me to, I don't know, sometimes I need some structures to prompt me into trying some new things. And if you get some structure and patterns and go, okay, here's a way you might approach it that's different, it can be really impactful. Well, certainly gets me through it.
Is there one from that book that you recall being really impactful for you that was a structure or a style?
So part of it was like there was an awful lot about listening, but really it was a way to bring your emotions into a conversation in the right way. So there was this little template that basically went, when you do X or say X, that makes me feel, and that makes me feel. Right?
Yeah.
So it's the double that makes me feel was like, this is how I feel, but then this is how I feel about having that feeling.
Yeah.
That's a little shift.
And when you actually, and to be honest, for the first little while, because I was a lot less comfortable with tapping deep emotion at the stage when I read that and talking about emotions with technical people. But I just did it mentally in my head of being deliberate with myself about my second level of emotion. Because quite often you go, and let's say you're receiving feedback, I shouldn't be feeling attacked right now because I asked for feedback.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about that kind of second layer of the emotion, the first layer of the emotion is I feel attacked, and the second layer of the emotion is how do I feel about feeling attacked? Um, and maybe that's, I feel like I've got to work on my vulnerability, or, I asked for feedback. I'm feeling attacked now. I'm getting it. What's going on with me? And
Yeah.
I think for so many things, and I'll use this all the time in my coaching, is the more you can become aware of what's going on in you, the more impactful you can be with others. And that was probably the biggest thing I got out of the book straight away, was it just helped me with my self-awareness. And then the more that I built that self-awareness of what was happening in me, the more powerful I could actually.
I guess my plus addition to that would be for me, the more you can find those friends, or as Cheryl says, the square squad that shines what you are back at you. I think it emphasized that even more. Cheryl will point out things that she sees that I am feeling, that I'm not recognizing that I'm feeling. And anytime she does that, it's probably 2 or 3 times a year. It always causes me to improve. Because you've got that person who's not you, who can say, this is what I see. Are you noticing it? Which is really powerful. And another reason it's great to have great teams.
True that.
Connection. So I was briefly, as you're talking, thinking about how many of these techniques are equally applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And when you brought up the Square Squad and Brene Brown's work on that, Cheryl's masterful use of it, I started wondering how often your team is or is not, or at least a special purpose work variation of that, and how many times it's been someone else in the organization that's actually my Square Squad, not my.
Mm-hmm. And
it's so consistently true. Is your Square Squad often somebody that's a little bit outside, that understands the context well, but is separate enough to truly ask those questions? Or can your deepest work relationship, the people you're talking to literally every day, reliably be that Square Squad? And with Cheryl, and I had the joy of working with her very closely for a year as well, she certainly was. But that's not a common experience for that to be somebody on my team.
I mean, I agree. I don't think it's common. I mean, to me, team and Square Squad overlap a little bit, but Cheryl's my heart friend. She sees my heart. I am on a team where I deeply enjoy everybody on my team. We're all very, very different. Not all of them would I put in the same category as Cheryl, as my deep heart friend who can also shine a light in me about personal things as well. And I think there's being intentional, at least for me, I'm very intentional about who are my Cheryls in my life. And some of those are work people and some of them are not. And then the team that I'm so proud of right now, I think we focus on being a team. And we're intentional about talking to each other when it doesn't feel like it's teaming. And trying new things all the time to make sure that we are not only being effective with each other, but effective in servitude to our why and what we deliver to the organization and to the world. And while I think those things are similar, I don't think they're equitable. I think one is a little bit more how do we be in service to each other and to our team purpose. And one is at least the way I look at Cheryl and I and my husband and I is how are we in service to each other and into growing each other as individuals.
Do you think, just following the thread of that, if you balance, there's an aspect of somebody who can see inside you, right? And there's another aspect of somebody who feels like they have permission to voice their insight.
Yeah, I like that.
How do you think that flavors in when you start to think about this notion of your team versus your heart friend? I love that phrase, by the way. I haven't heard that one before. Sorry, Gary.
I think there's a third dimension that, and you have the utter trust that when they use that permission, it's coming from positive.
Yeah.
And if you add that, maybe take away the C's inside you, the other two, I think are very powerful teams. They have permission in place, but maybe the C's inside you is balanced by something like has a true alignment to the technology, its quality, something that anchors it back to they're using that permission with the intent in service to this thing.
Yeah, I don't have any like argument against what you just said. The way I kind of think about it, or I have been thinking about it, is I think that the way that you work, like the way you show up at work, the work that you do, the work that you produce is one of the ways that you shine light in the world. And that they're a really healthy team is a team that together creates a brighter light. And then there's like the other part of you as a human, hopefully, which is how do you be someone who can shine light? And that's what I look for from friends and from loved ones is that. I think there's so much overlap. I'm not sure I would have described it the same way as you had because I think about it from like a light source kind of point of view instead. But I think being intentional about either one of those things, like what do you want to be the output of this effort that you put in, either the effort that you put into yourself or the effort that you put into the work that you produce, which hopefully is in service to others. I think those matter a lot.
I like your metaphor of guiding lights, not shade.
Yeah. Yep.
And sometimes it's the light that the guided flashlight where you're shining it at something, but the intention.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
A lot of deep.
I was just thinking maybe let's come back up.
Y'all do this to me all the time. You make me think deeper, which is fun. That's why you guys are awesome.
That's why we're here.
That's what makes the chats fun. So we had a couple of topics in our maybe pre-discussion, and we've probably got time for one of them.
Actually, a topic.
Yeah.
If you're watching and you haven't figured it out by now, we don't really have a set agenda for this. We have a couple of things we might talk about and a lot of curiosity.
And then we start talking and something happens.
Something happens.
So if we go back to a couple of ideas, Eric, you had some thoughts about distillation and some things that are going on for you there at the moment. Rebecca, you had some thoughts about prepping for our Berlin talks. We've probably got time for one or the other.
Dealer's choice. Go, Mark. What you got?
I got to confess, I would probably rather chat about distillation and save. I think knowing we're trying to keep these to an hourish now rather than the 2-hour marathons, I'd rather save the Berlin preparation stuff for next week with a bit more time up our sleeves.
Cool.
And see what we got on distillation.
Sweet.
Takes away, Eric.
I came in, so the prompt was looking at the number of different things I'm doing that require taking a whole bunch of stuff I know. And that can be a very large list, plus an even larger body of knowledge that's out there around a topic that I might learn in the process of research. And somehow distill it down to absurdly tight scope boxes. And this comes in a bunch of different forms right now. It could be, how do you take the entire concept of picking an example like team collaboration and distill it down to like a 2-minute micro-learning segment? Or how do you take everything that there is to be said about PI objectives? Like I just brainstorming, I got up to about 3,000 words before I got bored, and I was about halfway done with my prompt list, and distill it down into a one-pager. Or how do you take, thinking foreshadowing Berlin, how do you take a deep design topic around how to design and shape portfolios that is often weeks of conversations and workshops and explain it in a 25-minute time box. And I got stuck in this interesting conversational loop with myself around how do you take persona and purpose of the conversation, whatever shape it is, and this huge cloud, and what's the process that you two use mentally as part of compressing it into the right small amount of stuff that you're going to share? And I know both of you have huge doses of that you do in your creation and your day jobs as well. And I wanted to play with the mental model behind it a little bit without getting into any of the specifics. Like, obviously, it's not about any particular piece of content.
I'll open with, I find it much easier in my day job than in content creation.
Why?
So we struggle with having more theoretical knowledge than anybody could ever want from us.
I don't know that I struggle.
Well, we struggle with it because we don't, like, we're constantly going, oh, there's a gap here. Let me go and read 3 books to fill in another paragraph of knowledge, right? And the distillation is, I have so much in my head about this, to what's the thing you need from me. In my day job, I can look at the context and I can interact with a person or a group of people to go, what's the thing you need? Right? So it's very different from what do I want to give you. It's what do you need next, right? Wherever you are at the moment, 99.9% of the things I want to say would be useless to you. And what am I going to pick in that kind of 0.1%, which is enough to be inspirational about a future possibility, whilst also being tangible enough for you to step into. So distillation's then easy. It's just understanding the person or the people and the context they're in to laser in. The only challenge there, which I had to learn for a few years, was to spend enough time understanding where they're at before I started offering anything. I go into content creation, it's like, well, I'm blind now, right? I'm going to walk in prepared mode. I haven't had a chance to do a deep dive to go, who are you? And all the normal things I use for distillation are not there for me. So I enjoy watching you two because I learn a lot from the both of you about the way you think about distilling for content creation. You muted.
I made a good joke, just so you know. It was awesome. But from my own personal journey, I think what was hard for me at first was shifting from being somebody who was I was inside of a story, right? I was reading articles in order to build a story inside of my organization that, taking it, distilling it, turning it into my own because it's a framework and that's what you do. And applying it in my scope to somebody who has to and gets to craft content so that other people can go create stories. And it's still a journey I'm on, it's still a shift I'm on, but I think that was the biggest thing I really needed to start to think about. And honestly, Harry Kahneman has helped me a lot with. But thinking about what are we trying to share? What am I trying to share when I'm doing an article? What am I trying to share when I'm doing a talk? What am I trying to share when I'm doing X, Y, or Z, or in this particular situation, or Z? Sorry, Mark. And when it's more framework articles, I am trying to, in my mind, give people enough information that they can pull pieces together and start to think and create thought in others, not give thoughts so that people don't think, and then use in their particular situations around the world. And I think one of the hardest things to do is really consider that around the world piece of how do I make this simple enough that if in whatever culture it's understandable, while still bringing to life that an organization is really a very large system and you do need to think about how the systems connect, while giving enough information to help people pull threads together and push threads together, but not so much information that I'm creating the story that was my experience, but just giving them enough so that they can start their own journey. And I do think that's an ever-growing skill. I don't think I'm perfect at that yet, or maybe even great at that yet. That's why the team matters so much. But I think a lot about what's the story I hope people start to create? What are all the threads that could make that up? And how do I make this particular piece of content be concise and clear, with enough bridges to other pieces of content that they can still see the full system? From a technique point, I mean, we have techniques that help a lot with that, having a construct for length, having concepts around translatability, having concepts around what leading sentences should be versus endings should be. And that really does help a lot with what you were saying, Mark, of not having a full idea of like who it is that's going to end up reading something. So those kind of outlier boundaries do help you not start with nothing. And then just team feedback.
Sounds like it keeps you from overthinking the same things over and over.
It doesn't stop me from overthinking things personally. I tend to, when I'm first drafting, I think that is something I need to still work on, is when I'm first drafting things, I do tend to go really, really deep and think about all the things that I want to put out there. And then take steps back. And other people on my team are really good at like starting very simply and then adding things. I'm not sure that there's one right answer between those two styles. But they are pretty different styles.
Yeah, because that starts to get at, like, my challenge is choosing what to leave out. Because inevitably, when you're trying to compress things into a fixed size scope, whether it's a 1,750 word blog post, whether it's a 2,000 word article, whether it's a 5-minute microsegment, like it is an exercise in extreme reductionism down to just a few core points. And picking those points is often the hardest part. Once I know what I want to say, fitting it to the box and crafting it is actually relatively easy by comparison. But figuring out what concepts to leave out and making those tough choices, like, oh, but this would help this group and this would help this group, and getting past that's the one that I struggle with.
Yeah, I do think that's where brainstorming with other people really does help, because they're going to see things differently. But I mean, Harry's been really great at helping me just continue to think about, if you didn't tell them this, what would happen? Or if you didn't tell them this now, because whatever we're creating is not the last thing we're going to create. It's the thing that we're creating in this moment. And that continual reminder of, you don't have to do everything all the time, or help everybody else do everything all the time. And what's the simplest path that you guys can give somebody to get started, not what's the entire journey, has helped me start to cut stuff out and be more streamlined and give some grace that there will be more articles, there will be more presentations, there are more things that this person is going to go and do.
I'd say, I think maybe it's part of the joy for you, Rebecca, is any article you write is part of an ecosystem of articles.
Yeah. Why I love what I get to do is that it is part of this whole connected system, and I love the connected system thing. But I also like the grace that, like, you don't have to consider yourself done ever. I mean, when we were going back to like, what does it mean to give feedback or get feedback? I really like that there was a time there that the biggest compliment we would give each other was, "It's not terrible." Like, good job, it's not terrible. Because there's a lot of grace in that. Like we can come back to this. We can keep iterating. It's cool. Fine. What's enough to get people started? Because if there's nothing out there, there is nothing out there. What else is there? And this is more than nothing.
I think I get caught in this world of, what do you leave in? Is I think there's a place where you're trying to give actionable insight, and there's a place where you're trying to give a call to action. Right? At the end of distillation, it's got to be one of those things. And your emphasis becomes slightly different depending on whether it's a call to action or an actionable insight. I personally bias much more heavily to actionable insight, but then I think a lot of public settings are call to action. But if you look at Eric's Berlin talk, how does he, what does he get across in the half hour he's got for his talk? By the time you do an introduction and a conclusion, the only possible conclusion is it's a call to action, right? With enough ideas that somebody would go, when I respond to the call to action, I might follow this thread because this one seemed relevant to me. But it's not like, given the notion of, different types of portfolio structure and the implications thereof, right? There's no way in half an hour covering 6 or 7 different types of portfolio structure, you can actually give the actionable insight to go, this is what you should do in this situation. Or these are the deep trade-off considerations you should have about one of these things. And if you want to get to that actionable insight, you've got to really narrow your topic, which means in some fashion you've got to say, my topic exists surrounded by other topics, right? I'll come back next week and I'll do a video on this, or see this other talk. Or it's a little bit about sort of part of what we processed when we reflected on SPCs Unleashed, because you could summarize pretty much every episode that we did last year as go read a bunch of books and go to a bunch of conferences and training courses outside the safe sphere. Right? That was literally the thread of every episode. What was the inspiration we were hoping for people to have? Go read a bunch of books and go to a bunch of conferences. What was the thread in that? Most of those people could have read those books already. And that's the interesting trade-off, I think. Was there just enough information to inspire a call, inspire action the other side?
I mean, I don't know if I agree with those two things. I do think that there's a third, and I think, Eric, your talk might be in that third category of, and we're getting into Berlin Summit all of a sudden, but
this one's important.
Right. But I mean, giving information that people didn't have before, which I think that there are times when people need to have the information sink in, and then later on, they can come up with or have some other trigger in their head that helps them have the insight or an action. But that building that foundation so that people can have that future moment, I think, is also a really great impact of a talk. And it's also why I'm excited about the 3 different talks that we'll end up doing, is it does, to me, have all 3 different aspects of trying to inspire by potential, helping somebody see the potential, and then these are the puzzle pieces, and literally just these are the puzzle pieces, and educating on what those puzzle pieces are. And then now, if you've got the puzzle pieces and you're inspired, you could do some action. And so I do think there's that third one of giving information because it's the right thing just to give information. And it took me joining Framework to figure out that that's also a thing, honestly, and that it is critical and it's important.
I think you're right on that. And as we're having this conversation, I realized that, and I didn't think about this when I proposed the topic, as what we're talking about is quite analogous to learning design and learning objectives, or TDD and BDD, of saying, here's what we want to achieve. Now let's go write the code. And it's like, what do we want the reader, the consumer, to accomplish or be able to do? And some of those outcomes, learning outcomes, can be, I want to remember this or understand it. And some of them are, I want to be able to apply it, or I want to be able to evaluate it. There's different levels of learning in depth. And Mark, you and I kind of talked about this with the 5 levels type stuff.
Yeah.
When we start to get into this, it's outcome centric. I guess it comes down to know your customer, know what you want them to achieve.
So I'm going to react with a little bit of a challenge on that one.
Oh, excellent.
Do it. Do it.
I can't handle this.
So obviously we read the 5th discipline, Creating a Learning Organization, last year. Over the holidays, I read a bunch of the books he referenced. So I have kind of baked into me recently a whole bunch of books about learning. And if there's one connective thread to all of them, it's you don't learn without action. Right? Unless you apply the knowledge, there's no way you'll actually acquire the knowledge. And I mean, I know that from, from a long time. That's kind of held my, don't just randomly go on a training course if you're not going to be able to do something with it within weeks of going on the training course, or you won't remember it. And I think that's where I struggle with the information piece. When you just give information without some kind of action on the back end of it, what are you really giving?
Yeah,
Because they're
I
not
don't
really going to get the learning. Sorry, go Rebecca.
No, you're good. I agree. I think the key is, like, you don't have to be that person, though.
No.
Like, it could be that their next step is getting that from somebody else. And I do think, like, if you were to say, like, hey, your action is go build a Lego ship. By the way, I'm not going to give you the Legos. There's they need those Legos. And I think in some of the cases, and especially like some of the things that we're trying to help people do, those Legos are really hard to pick up, and they're strangely shaped, and you've got to like take a minute to just grok what just the pieces are. And I feel like that is a gift to be able to give people enough information that is clear enough that it can start to settle in their brain so that they can get the next step of now the insights. And when we're talking about like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 1 hour, and some of the concepts we're talking about are, this is how, in the end, we want people to be motivated to change a 10,000 or 100,000 person system that they may not feel like it's their job to do so, or empowered to do so, or whatever. I do think a gift is, here's your foundation. Let that sink. Somebody else is going to help you with that action. And that was what was, for me at least, a little bit of an aha of, like, actually from teaching Immersion Week so much, is I'm so used to like knowing all the context and not only like giving the foundation, but also, and here's the next steps we should take, because I was always inside the company. And now here's all the information. You guys need to go make that happen. I think they're just different approaches, and they both really matter. And I don't know, I do think there's something there about, like, it's not all about like your presentation at that moment. It's, you're creating something that is part of a connection and a connected journey for others. And I have trust, like in Berlin, that between the 3 of our talks and other people there will be part of gaining all of those little pieces, but all the pieces matter. But I like your challenge, so feel free to tell me you think I'm wrong.
Look, it was only as soon as, because if I listen to your response is actually you want to inspire curiosity, and that's a call to action. I'm giving you knowledge in the hope that you'll find some element of the knowledge I give you, be curious and seek help with it, or step into it in some fashion. At which point I'm fine, right? Because you're still in a call to action.
And I think in that, like in our context, if people are coming to something and we're sharing, I think there's a presumed relevancy that there is already a little bit of curiosity. As I compare that to, say, mandated HR training inflicted by a governance model that is, I need you to absorb this stuff and you're hopefully never going to be tested on it. But by the way, if somebody asks you for this code, never give it to them or what have you.
There's always tests for the mandatory training, Eric. At least in Australia.
Those tests are a complete joke 99% of the time, but still. But they, even if you look at Kirkpatrick, it tests that you have absorbed the material in the moment, but you will never actually apply it outside of that moment until it becomes relevant and hopefully not too late.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think what you just said matters a lot because there are very rare cases where somebody would come to one of our talks, read one of our articles without first already being curious or already searching for some sort of an answer. So it is like they had some sort of a call to action themselves, and this is hopefully what they needed to take another step.
And I think there's another category of call to action that's not quite curiosity, but it's we're sharing, and I'm thinking of this more from like a management structure out to an organization. We're sharing this information with the hopes that you will be ready to make sense of something that's going to happen or that's happening around you. And it's not really actionable in the sense that you're asking people to go do something or necessarily to be curious about it and ask a bunch of questions, but more like, we are sharing this new org announcement during this town hall and it will have some impact to you and your teams. And here's the write-up of it so that it makes sense to you, so that when you see these things happening around you, it's not as confusing and disruptive as it would otherwise be. And there's like that, I don't know, emotional settling element of information sharing that we don't necessarily talk about either. I don't think that's relevant to like our talks, but it could be relevant to other stuff we do. Actually, a lot of the stuff you described in your first response, Mark, around answering people in the moment in the consulting space. I'm not sure how that fits with distillation. Sorry.
No, I like that. I think it's true. I think there's also like just giving people a chance to create some new brain space for a new concept. I do think is an actual gift. Because there's, I don't know, like I just remember, Eric, I think were you in the class with me in San Diego, like the first beta of APM? I don't know if you were or not, but
I think I was 2 doors down teaching the first beta of architecture.
Anyway, that was one of those things, and I've had these moments a few different times where my brain after 4 days felt melty, and in a really good way. And it wasn't like I was just not at the point there, and especially after like the 10th day of Summit there, after taking a class and all that too, at all decide what I would do with the information. But I'm very, very thankful that I had all this new information that was starting to connect like new synapses in my head. And I knew it was going to make me stronger, even though I felt like brain melty and gooey. And I do think that's a gift, is like if you can get somebody to be brain melty and gooey and actually happy about it, man, go you. Even if it takes them like 2 more weeks to figure out what the heck they're going to do with it.
I think that's awesome, and you've now given me my new way of verbalizing neuroplasticity. It's like, neuroplasticity, what does it feel like at the end? Melty.
So,
ladies and gentlemen, if you read too much, you won't come up with your own dictionary. So it's also good to do that.
I've got to confess, I've been tossing up between going, we're a bit past planned time.
Oh, yeah.
And going, oh, but I want to talk about this. And I got to we're brain melty and gooey and excited about it and went, there's no better way to end a coffee club than on that note.
We started with torture and ended with goo. We're winning.
And with that envelope, thank you all for listening.
May your brains be melty and gooey.
In the best possible way.
Close to that.